Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 184, recording on Wednesday, July 22nd, a week until the Vikings roster is out on the practice fields at TCO Performance Center. And holy cow, am I ready to roll, ready to be out there and get more sunburnt than I already am. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see we're in the process of getting the new studio set up. Got a bunch of books behind me. Again, if you're not watching on YouTube, I recommend it a little bit just to check it out. And if you are, please subscribe right below there and then hit the like button. It helps us out. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts, not going to complain about it. And if you're on there, we appreciate if you hit those 5 stars, follow us, and you can review. It's early in the week, so you guys know the drill. We're going to take some questions that I fielded from all of you on social media. Got some on Twitter and then some on the Instagram page, and hopefully you're following us there because that's priority question asking territory at Alec Lewis Show on Instagram. The first question, the honorary first question, comes from a guy on Twitter named Age at AJ Murphy 763. He wants to know, do you think the fact that the quarterback battle won't be decided until late in the preseason puts the rest of the offense at a disadvantage? So this is probably the right place to start because it's been the topic that people have discussed in the last couple days. And it's most likely a reference to the reporting from Ian Rappaport of ESPN, which feels somewhat odd to say, but I believe Ian on NFL Network, which is obviously owned by ESPN, mentioned the fact that the Vikings could take this quarterback competition all the way through training camp, through the preseason. And I'll just begin by saying, like, I've got, and Ian knows this, but I've got immense respect for him, the way he does a job, the career he's built for himself, and the work that he puts in on a daily basis. So I don't want to say anything, obviously, that's going to cross that reporting. He's obviously very plugged in. I will just say, AJ, from the get-go, that I just, with the quarterback situation as a whole, like, I just would like to see how it plays out on a daily basis beginning next Wednesday, with my own eyes and ears, being there every day, at practice. And for me, it's what do the reps look like? How are the reps being allocated? What does the performance look like from both J.J. McCarthy and Kyler Murray with those reps? What are the reactions on the field look like? What are the reactions afterward and conversations sound like? What do I hear? How do they respond? Both guys from good days, bad days, team period, 7-on-7, and all of that. And I think that that detail, those examples, that just first person kind of observation for me will give, in my opinion, it's going to be my best barometer to bring to you guys, just on where the quarterback competition stands. It's really hard to hide stuff in training camp, in the sense, especially when the fans show up, because the fans have the ability to videotape everything, and that's all throughout practices. And so it's very, just, I'd say, self-explanatory in terms of who's getting which opportunities, when they're getting them, where they're getting them, how the practices are kind of being allocated. And I think rather than trying to project how long it's going to go, when it's going to wrap up, when I'm going to know, I just think living it every day, you'll kind of feel that in many ways. And then as far, AJ, like to the question of, would it if that does end up happening and the competition goes all the way through and it's even 50-50 split, and then, both quarterbacks are playing all throughout training camp and the preseason and joint practices, and it's truly even in every sense of the word throughout the entirety of August, would that put the offense at a disadvantage? Like, I do think that would make it pretty tough, in the sense that the amount of reps that you do take, especially when the reps are as integral to preparation as training camp, joint practices, preseason reps tend to be, like, those do matter. The timing within those reps matter. This offense, the Vikings offense, you guys who are not new to the show or new to following this team, this is a very rhythm and timing based operation, where being at the right spot at the right time is so much of the engine that makes this thing go. And the more opportunities you have to feel what is the right time, what is the right rhythm of the play, what is the right footwork, the more likely it's going to be that the quarterback, and then by extension the entire offense, has the correct feel entering the season. I've also said this. I said this with Judd Zolgad last week or 2 weeks ago. Like, last year, it felt like throughout most of training camp, and just my recollection kind of broadly, was the offense was always behind. The defense was dominating. And I think probably the narrative was, well, the defense is going to be really, really good. And so that's not a referendum on how the offense feels. And while that did end up being true, the defense was really, really good, I do think it is psychologically important for the offense, specifically this offense, with where they're at coming off the season that they're coming off of, for all of the pieces at play to have the optimism and belief that this unit can be a unit that this team can lean on when they have to. So, I do think if the thing goes all the way through and it's 50-50, the reps that obviously are being allocated to the other quarterback, or other quarterbacks, would be reps that it'd be nice to give to one single guy. I will also say this, and the more I've prepared my mind for what this is going to be beginning next week and beyond, like, you cannot overstate the importance of injury risk, injury history, durability, for whether it is Kyler Murray, JJ McCarthy, or Carson Wentz. All of these guys over the course of their careers, at all levels of their careers, have had trouble staying healthy. And so there is going to be, whether it's early on in training camp, whether it's at the end and it is a 50-50 split, and if in that situation Kevin O'Connell explains to media members that part of the strategy is knowing that there is risk and injury risk, like, I think it's going to be hard to poke holes in that as well. So let's just evaluate it, I think, rather than predict when the time is going to come at which it becomes clear what the Vikings' plans are. I think living it every day, it'll become pretty clear. So that's kind of my approach and my process. And you guys who watch the show, listen to the show, know that I will be probably, we plan 2 times a week. I expect this stuff to be of interest every single day. So we're going to do as much as possible to bring you as informed, kind of a look at what it feels like every single day. Next question comes from Tim Whalen, who, hopefully, Tim, you're up there sitting up at the perch at training camp. Tim has worked and volunteered with the Vikings a little bit over the course of the last couple of years. So always a familiar face who I appreciate getting to see every day. And that's so much. I mean, I've said this before, but when people ask, what are you looking forward to training camp? So much of it is just being around the people that you get to be around every single day. And that's part of what makes the job, what I'm so grateful for, probably doing the job. So Tim, hope to see you out there. But Tim wants to know, is the competition for the starter the only competition in camp? What about Carson as the number 2, regardless of who becomes the starter? I would say definitely not the only competition in camp. I mean, whether it's edge rusher depth, whether it's tight end depth, whether it's cornerback safety, what are the numbers going to look like on the back end of the secondary? Like, there are running back. What is the probably percentage breakdown of snaps, which I'll talk about in a little bit, going to look like? There are many iterations, I think, of what competition could look like. As far as, the question of what about Carson Wentz as the number 2, regardless of who becomes the starter, I would say I don't expect things, especially early on, to differ a ton from what it looked like throughout the spring, where Carson Wentz got probably 3-4 reps throughout our practice, whereas J.J. McCarthy, Kyler Murray probably more like, I don't know, 12 to 15, 12 to 20 reps. So just minimal reps for Carson. I think that's not going to be a declaration on what his role is going to be, but I do think it is a sign from the coaching staff of belief and faith in the event that he is needed, Carson Wentz, throughout the 2026 season. There is, faith and optimism that he'd be able to step in and perform. I mean, it's my understanding that Carson Wentz didn't sign back with the Vikings this spring with any guarantee of you're going to be this, you're going to be that. I think so much of that for him was just a trust level in coaching staff, a real, enjoyment of what the season was, regardless of the injuries that he suffered in 2025, and really like the way teammates took to him. I mean, it didn't take long for Justin Jefferson to be nicknaming him C. Wentz, and Justin doesn't have to do that. He doesn't do that without intentionality. So I think that's, I think that's relevant. It's interesting. The Carson Wentz question made me go back. Like, Carson last year signed, I believe it was like August 24th. So I think training camp had essentially been done. I mean, it was done at that point. And so he did not get, and you kind of forget that with the way that he did step in and really provide the offense. I wouldn't say like a ton of life. I don't think it returned the offense to be, or it lifted the offense to be in a top 10, top 5 offense in the NFL, because it didn't do that. But it did make the passing game viable. And it actually made me go look up. So Kevin O'Connell got here obviously in 2022. That's when I started covering the team. So that's really where the history and my background knowledge is probably most deep. And if you go back to the time that Kevin O'Connell got here, 7 quarterbacks have thrown 100 passes in a season for KOC. That's 2022 Kirk, 2023 Kirk, 2023 Dobbs, 2023 Mullins, 24 Darnold, 25 JJ, 25 Carson. And so part of me was like, I really wanted to take a look at like, where did Carson and his production rank by comparison? And it was interesting. So like passing yards per game in 2025, Carson averaged 243. That was 5th out of the 7, but there's definitely a major drop off after Carson to Josh Dobbs and JJ McCarthy. And I think it shows that like Carson got it to a certain bar. Completion percentage, very similar, was at 65.1%. Major drop off after him, down to like 59%. EPA, which is an advanced metric for those of you who are unfamiliar, that kind of takes into account down-to-down efficiency. Carson's was at like 0.02, similar to Kirk Cousins' 2022, which was 0.03. And then there was a major drop-off after that to Josh Dobbs and J.J. McCarthy. And then touchdown to interception ratio, Carson was actually 4th of the 7. So for me, that was a very clear marker and indication of, and it's validating what we all saw from our own eyes of like when Carson played, did he take a lot of sacks? Yes. Did he run himself into some physicality and some collisions that he definitely, that's going to lead to injury? Absolutely. But did he return the passing game more to the systematic expectations of what we've come to kind of, all of us, you guys as fans, me as media, expect when Kevin O'Connell is designing, scheming, and calling offense? Yes, he did. And so it also, in many ways, like looking up those numbers, J.J. McCarthy, unsurprisingly, when you take out the entire, you go through the entire breadth of what the 2025 season was for him, he was close to the bottom in all of those. And what I will do, and I'll make sure to do it for our next episode, is just segment kind of those last few games, just to be fair in terms of the developmental arc, even though like the sample size is definitely small. But I'd say, it's, people say probably a lot of ramble. Can Carson become the number 2? I mean, I think it's so much of everything is circumstantial. What does health look like? How did the training camp go? And it's easy and probably lacks nuance to just make some blind projection. But I think you have to have all those data points to feel like you could make a convicted, projection there. I do think, and I feel very comfortable saying this, that in a pinch, if the Vikings have to turn to Carson Wentz to play games in the 2026 season, they're going to be confident that the offense is not going to just fall off a cliff when if that's the case, what have you. So, I think that's a good question. It'll be interesting just to monitor the daily reps that Carson Wentz does get and how those kind of look in general. But appreciate the question, Tim. Really, obviously looking forward to seeing you out there, hopefully, at training camp. This show, which we do at least 2 times a week, every single week on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple, on iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts, is presented by First Resource Bank. Hopefully by now you know about First Resource Bank. You probably see the branches driving around the Minneapolis area, and I'd say look for them because you want to walk in and get your day brightened. It's probably not a better spot to make that happen. But it's a bank run by 3 guys, really. And I mean, I specify Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson, but it is a group collaborative effort of a ton of people who really have wanted to build a bank in the Midwest that, is embedded within the Minneapolis community of a bunch of people who want to be connectors and build bridges, and they are huge Vikings fans. So just cannot say enough about what their platform provides if you're looking for a spot to do some banking with. And then their support with the Alec Lewis Show has been unbelievable, and really grateful to be with them, obviously, for another season. The show is also sponsored by Pro MN Athletics. So a few years ago, 3 guys similarly came together, Kurt Graham and Tanner, great dudes. Tanner is Tanner Morgan, former Gophers quarterback, and they're like, how can we give back in many ways? How can we lift the tide of youth football development in Minneapolis, in Minnesota? And they have done that in a pretty profound way. I know this upcoming week they're having a huge local 7-on-7 tournament that has a ton of local high schools, local schools participating, and they've got 7-on-7 leagues throughout the summer. They've got academies throughout the fall and winter. They've got private events like a faith walk that Tanner Morgan did with some of the best high school quarterbacks in the state. So I'd say if your kid plays football, if they want to play football, if you know of friends or families whose kids are really into playing and have visions and hopes of playing competitively in middle school, high school, college, please check out Pro Man, reach out to those guys, and like they will build in many ways like a curated opportunity for your son to contribute, to compete, and to really just kind of follow those dreams, those hopes. So been awesome to partner and really try to spread the message of what those guys are all about. So appreciate Pro MN for their support. Next question comes from a Twitter user, Pie in a Can. That's very creative. Thoughts on the Odyssey? I really want to go see it, the movie, before the season starts. I would be curious for you guys who have watched it, reaction, thoughts. Should I prioritize my time as I'm preparing for this 2026 season to go see the Odyssey? Please let me know. But I'm intrigued, certainly. Next question comes from Hector Kim on Twitter. Thoughts on the addition of Jawan Jennings to the offense. Also wants to know whether Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones are going to have a 50-50 split, more like 70-30, 80-20. Also curious about Caleb Banks' early season predictions. So Jawan Jennings, we've talked a lot about on this show, and I have not moved off my opinion that the addition of him to be wide receiver 3 at the cost that the Vikings signed him was just massive. It really rounds out one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver room in the NFL. Obviously, there are some close competitors, and the Vikings are vying with or among the elites in that conversation. But Juwan Jennings in terms of what he can provide in the run game as a run blocker and his willingness to be the gritty type of receiver that he is. I think that was a critical addition. Like, losing Jalen Naylor is not something to sniff at. He knew all elements of the playbook. Vertical speed is not something that is easily replicable. And though he did drop passes in certain key moments over the last couple of years, like, Jalen Naylor was a pretty dang reliable wide receiver 3. So to replace him with a guy who's done it at the level that Juwan Jennings has done it, I just think is absolutely huge. I have gone down the road mentally, I'm sure like you guys have, a little bit of, okay, let's say in the event there's a wide receiver injury, Juwan Jennings has to step in to number 2. What happens at 3? What does that look like? Like, I still think that's a spot where you feel pretty solid about Juwan Jennings being able to take more of a pass catching load. I also think that's a point at which, like, that would be a really good opportunity for a guy like TJ Hockenson to prove that he can bounce back from the torn ACL. And then, like, wide receiver 3, that's where the development of Ty Felton, like, I've said this on the show, I've said this in writing, just because you signed Juwan Jennings and Ty Felton hasn't contributed as a receiver through a season of his career doesn't mean you just punt on the development and it's over. Like, that guy in Ty Felton is still going to need to progress on a daily basis to be viable if a circumstance like that presents itself. And for me with Juwan Jennings, like, the biggest question I have is, how willing is he going to be the junkyard dog run blocker, as much as the Vikings are probably going to ask him to do that? Like, I think the more willing he is, the more he owns that area of his game and of his play, the more impactful he's going to be for the Vikings. But it all ties together. Like, I've gone down this road before of on the podcast of, you got, let's say if Kyler Murray ends up becoming the starter, you've got defenses keying on him and his athleticism. You've got defenses with multiple bodies keying on Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. That presents a lot of one-on-one opportunities for a guy like Juwan Jennings, who has made hay on those opportunities in past years. And so I just think, like, there's space and advantages that at this offense at its very best in 2026 that will really benefit Juwan and what's possible for him. As far as Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones, I think the split will be pretty similar, close to 50-50-ish to 2025, I think, in the best case scenario. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, A, for me, the health of both of those guys, and then B, like, what type of juice are they providing? I reported that the Vikings were definitely curious and in on some of the high-profile free agent running backs. That obviously didn't come to fruition. And so, because Aaron Jones is as good of a dude as he is and as reliable of a player in the pass game, run game, pass protection game as he is, like, that re-signing made a ton of sense. So, you add in his leadership in a locker room that obviously is going to need it. But for me, it's like, if you're not getting the requisite juice out of those two guys, or there's an injury, does Damon Claiborne at that point become worthy of a look? Like, that's one of the questions I have. And at what point does the offense have to get to a spot at which he does probably become worthy of a look? So, interesting layer for me to, keep eyes and ears on. And then Caleb Banks, I think predictions right now for him are really hard. Like, I haven't seen him in a uniform actually practice on the field. So until I do that, like, let's get, reach that hurdle. And then in some of the team drills, what does it look like? Who's he running with? How many snaps does it look, or reps is he getting allocated compared to a Levi Drake Rodriguez or an Elijah Williams? Like, I think, I want to get down that road before I make any predictions. And I think, the exposure to the system early on with Ryan Nielsen as the D-line coach, like, I think Ryan Nielsen's really going to be good for those guys. I really think he's going to push those young players in that room. And I think he's going to need to get the best out of them. So I'd say give me like a week and a half, and I will be much more confident in whatever prediction I settle on with Caleb Banks. But I mean, the talent, I don't think it's a question, is undeniable that he has the amount of versatility and talent to where immediate impact is sensible, as long as the health gets to the right spot. Next question comes from Instagram at Herme HERME4. Who gets more playing time on defense this year, Jake Golday or Jacoby Thomas? I thought that was a great question. It tested me a little bit. I'm not going to take a cop-out answer like I did with Caleb Banks, and I'll say Jacoby Thomas. I just, Brian Flores loves using his safeties. He typically finds a way to get his best guys out there. We've seen, last year, Josh Metellus missed toward the end of the year with a shoulder. Harrison Smith obviously remains up in the air as far as his potential, return or not. Jay Ward definitely showed some flashes down the stretch. Theo Jackson, I think, is reliable because of his smarts in many ways, but, there just feels to me more like, an immediate, early season potential action there. Now I'll say linebacker depth, if you start to lose a Blake Cashman and Eric Wilson, the answer probably looks a lot different, but I just think all players healthy, all things being equal, I'd probably, go Jacoby Thomas there. Max Suits Bear on Instagram, at Alec Lewis Show on Instagram. Any current players you think have a bright future in coaching? Josh Metellus would absolutely be one of them. I think last year during the preseason, he even called some plays, so he would be one. Max Brosmer at quarterback. Like you guys, or, people laugh about Brosmer because of the performance or what have you, but just from my understanding, like the level of schematic depth that this guy can go, and quarterback understanding and knowledge, like he very much, we'll see how his playing career goes. But like, I could see him certainly in the, David Blau, Sean Mannion type of arc where, kind of sees everything in a really good system to start out their career, understands the layers of the West Coast system that has proliferated the NFL, and then, is able to, has feel and awareness and ability to be personable, to be kind of like more of the, voice you could lean on. So, I'd say those two immediately come to mind, but there's probably a lot more. At Gustafson Kevin, are they going to add anyone to the secondary? I mean, I think the obvious question mark remains Harrison Smith, and we talked about that last week, but don't think much has changed. I just think it's pretty up in the air. The Vikings and Harrison are very much on the same page, knowing that when Harrison is ready to make a call one way or another, I think everybody's on board with that. With Harrison, like, you just know the competitive juices will probably start to flow at the end of, or at some point in training camp. And then, does that push him over the top? Does he want to wait it out even longer? How does the body feel? You wade into those questions. But otherwise, like, I think safety, you've got depth there. Khalif Halessi's kind of a lower level, lesser known safety name who the Vikings have liked for some time. I think at cornerback, you've got James Pierre now. You've got Chuck Demmings. That room is deeper than it's been. So, I think for the most part, we'll see on Harrison Smith, but things seem pretty settled there. At Elijah Torek, are we getting LeBron James or nah? I haven't talked to Rich Paul recently, but next time he shoots me a text, I'll let you guys know for sure. It would be sweet. The more this has gone on, like, I think you've had different perceptions, and I defer always to John Krasinski, my colleague at The Athletic, but, there hasn't been a lot of Wolves connection recently, so it's been kind of interesting. At CW Johnson 47, Vikings had one of the lowest nickel rates last year. Do you expect that to continue? I'm glad you asked that question. For those of you who probably want to know more in the weeds, nickel would be 5 defensive backs. I'm planning on, at the end of this week, probably Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, doing a pretty deep film study myself on the defense of 2025, just to have a pretty good feel as I walk out the training camp to know what looks different and what doesn't. I also am planning to have a guest to talk a little bit about this. So come back. I would say either later in the week or early next week, and we'll have much more on that question, but I appreciated it, and it's a really good one. Couple more words from some of our partners here on the Alec Lewis Show. If you've got kids, you know back-to-back school season is a lot. Supply list, shoe shopping, juggling all the schedules. It is not exactly a magical time of year. The Great Clips app, though, that really does work like magic. With just a few taps, you can find a salon nearby, see the wait time, and check in when it works for you. You can even get a message when it's your turn, so you know when to pack up the kids and head over. Oh, and the savings. That's where the real magic happens. So when it's time for back-to-school haircuts, download the Great Clips app. It may not take care of all your back-to-school to-dos, but it'll definitely make some of that stress disappear. Great Clips. It's going to be great. I also want to mention Aquarius Home Services, your independent, authorized Connecticut dealer. It's still summer, and that means home improvement season at Aquarius. They know that managing a household and all the expenses that come with it is no easy task. They also know how important having worry-free water in your home is. Your family deserves water you can trust. You use it every day for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and bathing. That's why Aquarius Home Services is excited to share their summer trade-in and trade-up program. Trade in your old water softener and trade up to a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. If you want to avoid hard water, rusty water, nitrates, lead, or arsenic, and you want clean water, I highly recommend Aquarius Home Services, and they will get you set up with a Connecticut water system. Dan Osmium on social media, on Twitter, asked, will Kyler be good? And it was kind of a funny question, but I just mentioned going through the defensive tape. I actually last couple days, nights have spent some time going through Kyler's games in 2025, first 5 weeks of the season for the Cardinals, to kind of reacclimate myself, reorient myself, and then have also watched a little Dolphins tape to try to get a feel for how Miami was running the football a little bit with Frank Smith as the assistant head coach. So I'm more probably on the run game later. I've watched the first three games of Kyler throughout the season. It's been pretty interesting, or throughout 2025. It's been interesting. Definitely a lot of shotgun pistol usage, not a ton of under center. When they were under center, they ran the ball a lot. How much of this is because Kyler prefers things spread out and it's easier to see out of the gun? I think that's a worthwhile question. How much of it was that Arizona didn't want a ton of deep drop stuff, so they preferred being out of the shotgun? I think that's a fair question. I would say it's pretty crazy. Like the Cardinals were 2-0 to start the season with Kyler as the quarterback. And then week 3, they played San Francisco. I think this was in San Francisco. And I mean, pretty solid, I think the final was like 16-15, but pretty solid game from Kyler from the film. There were 2 just wild drops. I mean, the second was less of a drop. I think the first was like a potential touchdown type play, dump off pass to the running back DeMarcado, and he drops the ball. Again, it could have been a touchdown if the block in front of him was good. And then that would have really separated Arizona. And then late in the game, I think it was like a 3rd and 9, Cardinals got the ball, less than 2 minutes left, chance to seal the game. And like, they've got it as long as they convert this play. They go shotgun, deep drop. Kyler threads the ball over the middle to Zay Jones. Looks like he catches it. Like, could the ball have been led Zay Jones a little more? Yes, but like, he had his hands on the ball. If he comes up with that catch, Arizona wins the game. They're 3-0. Like, what does things end up looking like for that? It's crazy how certain plays like that alter the course of, potentially games, seasons, narratives. So, like, I think, Dan, I'm still very fascinated by the fit with Kyler Murray and what he prefers from a schematic standpoint, and Kevin O'Connell, what the offense has been from a systematic standpoint, and how those two worlds marry together. Like, I don't think you can overstate or overlook the Miami Dolphins and Frank Smith, who came over from Miami, like they lived a lot out of the shotgun. And so they really lived marrying a shotgun RPO oriented quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa with the system that Mike McDaniel always knew from San Francisco. So Frank Smith has kind of lived in many ways that bridge, that transition, that transformation, which I imagine will help just from a philosophical standpoint, from an ideology standpoint, will help Kevin O'Connell kind of orient things. But you see on tape, like Kyler Murray goes under center and bootlegs out to the left or naked keeper to the right. Like he looks pretty fluid on those plays. He looks athletic. He looks comfortable. I'd say on film, edge pressure doesn't seem to really bother him a ton, whether it's like one of the tackles gets beat. It's a lot of the interior pressure stuff is where he can run into trouble a little bit. And you do wonder at times if like there are a couple instances in my mind of like third reading the progression, receiver running over the middle of the field. Why didn't he get to that progression? Like the pocket is clean enough. Did he just not see it? So, it's all pretty telling. I think I'll just say this, like I've talked to a lot of people who spent time around him in Arizona, coaches, executives, scouts, teammates. And I think for the most part, the people around him, believe that this marriage, of quarterback and play caller can be successful. So, that's pretty telling to me. And we'll just kind of see how it goes on a daily basis. But looking forward to it. We will be back later this week with guests. We'll be back early next week with guests, preparing to ramp up the Alec Lewis Show a pretty good bit. So please stay locked into the feeds on social media at Alec Lewis Show, to the YouTube channel where you can subscribe, to the audio feeds on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart. We're ready to roll. Stories galore at The Athletic as well. I should probably mention that, given that it is my day job where I put in as much work as I possibly can. So looking forward to this thing. Looking forward to get going. Appreciate you guys being here for episode 184, and we will talk to you very, very soon.